I'm going to show you how to make perfect cheese sauce. So I'm just making a small amount today. So what I've done is I've measured out 1 ounce of butter, which is about 28 grams. About 28 grams, it's 28 grams. So I'm just going to melt that gently, not too fast. You don't want to burn it. And I've also measured out the same amount of plain flour. And my milk, which is half a pint. So the easiest way to remember, so you use the same amount of butter and flour. So if you use 1 ounce of butter, you use 1 ounce of flour, so you use half a pint of milk. Therefore, if you use 2 ounces of butter, 2 ounces of flour, you use a pint of milk. So once your butter is melted, can't really see it because it's not very much, put in the flour, get a spoon, and mix it together so it's all blended. This is called a roux. So that's what it looks like now. Now at this point you just leave it on the heat for a couple of minutes, not high heat. You just cook it for a couple of minutes. So while you're doing that, you can get your cheese. Which, if you haven't already, then you can grate your cheese. Now I've pretty much filled up, well, probably about 3/4 filled this. I'll probably need to use at least, I'm just going to turn this up a tiny bit because you want this to bubble a little bit. So yeah, I'll probably use at least half of that. There is a measurement for cheese, but anyone who knows me well knows that I like more cheese. So I've got this on, the heat is, it's on number 3 of 6, but I've just turned it up to that. It's not really bubbling yet. This is the saucepan that this always works best in. And I think it's quite a sort of thick bottom saucepan rather than really thin. But I think what that means is it keeps the heat for longer. So if you like overcook something, it'll keep cooking quite a lot because there's a lot of heat held within the metal. But for this sauce, it's always the best one. Right, I shall let you have a look at what that looks like now. So it's bubbling away nicely. So now you have to take it off the heat. So if you're using gas, you can probably just switch it off, but I've got this hob which will stay warm, so I'll move it away from that plate. And then you want to start adding your milk. And you want to add it just a little bit at a time, okay? So I'm probably putting like 50 mils, and I'm just stirring it. And what happens is it'll go quite thick. So remember, I said I'd only put a tiny bit in. Oops. So I've not put much in. You stir it quite vigorously. Try and get it smooth. And then I'll just keep adding more milk. Put a bit more in that time. It's really lumpy. so it's always going to be lumpy. I'm using a metal spoon, but sometimes I'll use a whisk just to get the lumps out more easily. It's up to you. Sometimes I'll push down on the lumps with the spoon just to try and break them up a bit if they're big. But you just need to keep stirring it. That's the best thing. You can't rush it, unfortunately, if you want to do it properly. So it's still quite lumpy. It's sort of like a creamy colour. Just add a bit more milk. Probably used about 3/4 or 2/3 of it now. It gets easier to mix it in the thinner it gets. And just pour the rest of the milk in. Okay, once you've poured the milk in, put it back on the heat. And you want to heat it up, but you don't want it to boil. You want to do it slowly. The other thing is you just need to keep stirring it and stirring it and stirring it. It's really boring. So I'll show you what it looks like just now. Oops. Okay, so it's quite runny, quite thin. So I'm just going to be stirring it now for probably about, I don't know, 10 minutes at least. Well, it's not very much, so it might be a bit quicker. So I've turned the heat back up to number 3. I'll probably put it up to 4. But then if it starts sort of bubbling or that, I'll turn it back down again. And I'll also just keep checking for any other lumps or round the edge of the saucepan. Sometimes bits of the roux get stuck there. So you can just scoop it all in. Just keep stirring, 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 stirring for ages. Still stirring. It's probably been about 5 minutes. When you're stirring, you need to make sure that your spoon is trying to touch all the parts of the saucepan, like at the base, because otherwise bits of it might start to thicken and get stuck to the bottom of it. So that's why if you, well, I think most people would probably use a wooden spoon. I'm just using a metal spoon because that was what was nearby. But also, if it's a bit lumpy, then if you get your whisk out, and if you're whisking it, you know, the whisk has a kind of wider base, so that's going to touch more of the saucepan, I suppose. So what's happening is there's quite a lot of steam coming up from it. It's not bubbling. It's getting a wee bit thicker. It's very gradual. But if you don't keep stirring, it just gets stuck to the saucepan. Oops, and then it gets burnt. And it's tempting to put the cheese in too early, but don't do that either. I feel like that then makes it take longer. So just keep it on the heat. I turned it up to about 4 on my cooker, but then it was steaming quite a lot. It wasn't bubbling, but it was steaming quite a lot. So I thought I'll turn it down to 3. It's still steaming a lot, which is fine because the steam coming out of it is obviously removing the water, which then makes it thicker. Stirring it faster doesn't make it cook faster. Probably going to have another few minutes of stirring, so I'll pause again. Okay, now it's bubbling, and I stopped stirring it because I got distracted. but it's getting nice and thick now. So you can see it's definitely thicker. So making sure it's not lumpy, I'm going to start adding in cheese. Like I said, I'm going to use probably at least half of this, and then I'll taste it. And I don't put any salt and pepper into it until I've added the cheese. I read somewhere years ago that that was the way to do it. So, looking nice and thick. I use extra mature cheddar, extra mature vintage. Get nice and thick. So just let that cheese melt. Obviously keep stirring it, otherwise it's just going to get stuck to the bottom of the saucepan. If you think it's warm enough to melt the cheese, and if you think it's thick enough, then I'm going to turn the heat off now. So I'm going to keep stirring so that the cheese all melts nice and even. Pretty smooth. I'm going to add in some salt, some pepper, not too much because this is for the kids and me. I'll probably take theirs out and then I'll possibly add a bit more salt, a bit more pepper. So I'm going to taste it now, so I just take my spoon out and then let a bit drop into my finger. I mean, it's nice, but it needs more cheese, which is my motto in life. Most things can be improved with more cheese. So that's with half a pint of milk. Get quite a decent amount of cheese sauce. And it freezes, so if you make twice as much than you need, like don't shove your pasta into there, take like half of it out and then put your pasta in, and then you can add more cheese sauce into it, back into the pasta or whatever you're having it with. I'm having it with broccoli and macaroni. Even this might be more than I need. Normally I would make a pint. Oh, and this one I've made with half and half whole milk and skimmed, semi-skimmed milk. Normally I'd just make it semi-skimmed milk. Okay, another taste test. That's nice. I'll let you see what it looks like. There we go. Perfect cheese sauce.